Hello, my name is Kabir Nath, and I'm the President and CEO of Otsuka's North American pharmaceutical businesses. It's my very great pleasure to introduce our guest speakers for today's conversation, Dr. Alpha Stewart and Dr. Valerie Purdy-Greenaway. We're here to talk about the impact of systemic racism on the mental and physical health and the well-being of the Black community. As we know, this systemic racism affects people in every part of life, but what role specifically does the education system play in perpetuating it?
Well, I think beginning with how we have constructed our educational system, we can go back historically to a time when if you were Black or brown, it was illegal to teach you to read. We now accept without question the fact that education is at the root and serves as a foundation for all of our future success. If you are educated, you are more likely to be able to get employment. You are more likely to be able to sustain that employment. If you can sustain employment, you feel better and you feel like you're contributing to your family, to your community, to your nation. And certainly, again, the pandemic has highlighted for us what that disparity does and what it looks like, first of all, and what it does to the young people who are exposed to it. A child in a certain neighborhood in Memphis did not have access to broadband. So supplying a device for virtual school was almost nonsense, because if I can't get online and I can't connect my device, then I can't learn. In many minority communities, we recognize how important that is to getting ahead. Our parents, our grandparents beat it into our heads early on that you must get an education, you must go to school. The expectation is there. It is the opportunity. It is the exposure. It is those things that are limiting in that respect that create, and then you layer on the zero tolerance disciplinary rules and the likelihood that at the third grade, if you are not reading at third grade level, someone somewhere is preparing for your existence in the correction system. Those are not the kinds of positive, aspirational, leading to success trajectories that we would like to have in our kids' minds and in our communities.
So, Dr. Stewart, you touched there on the school to prison pipeline, which is, frankly, to me, an awful phrase, but also a very evocative, descriptive phrase. Maybe you can explain that to our viewers a little more, and then maybe start to think about how we can break that cycle.
Historically, in Black and brown communities, the zero tolerance for any behavior that was outside of what was considered acceptable and normal resulted in the child being moved onto a path of successive discipline. It could start with something as simple as you have to leave the classroom and go to the principal's office. And in places like schools where there is zero tolerance for anything other than following the rules, that gets the child into, quote, trouble. And once you are on the path into trouble, you begin to be viewed as a problem. But we have to keep thinking in the context of these are children. And for a child who, for whatever reason, comes to school, maybe witnessed something, and these are real situations that I can talk about, has witnessed some heinous crime in their neighborhood or in their home, has been exposed to that, has spent the night watching red and blue lights blinking all around, having people crying, watching bodies in the street, whatever the trauma is for that child. When they come to school the next day and they aren't appropriately behaving, the answer is not to put them into discipline. The answer is to find out what has happened and how can we help you. But for so many of our children, that is not the course of action that they see. If you continue to misbehave, the school resource officer in many jurisdictions has the authority to simply transport you to the juvenile detention center in your area. And that represents a focus on behavior that could well be the response to trauma, to undiagnosed and untreated mental illness, to a variety of situational, societal, environmental factors. A child who is hungry is more likely to act out. A child who is being abused is more likely to act out. A child who has spent the night protecting siblings from some other harm is more likely to act out in school. And so when we don't change the narrative from what is wrong with you to what has happened to you, even the phrasing of that small thing, what has happened to you, what is happening to you, can make all the difference in the world. We see the disparity in how they are handled once they get into the system for the same offense. A young white kid from the suburbs whose parents come and appeal might get a very different outcome than the young Black boy whose mom is holding down 3 jobs, can't make the court appearance, is deemed an unfit parent, and loses her parental rights because she's trying to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. And really cannot manage this child who is exposed to things in the community, from violence to gangs to everything else that goes on outside of where we see them in that classroom.
And I'd like
Thank you,
to
Dr.
add on to that, because I mean, it's hard to listen, to listen to you, Dr. Stewart, because this is a narrative that we just hear, year after year after year. And one of the things that the pandemic has really exposed is just what that can look like. I mean, even when you're in your homes, many teachers you see in the backgrounds, they're some are at a resort, or they're out in the country, or they're out, and you can start to see the systemic inequality between the resources that different people have. But you can even take it one step further, which is, one of the things that becomes incredibly powerful are the social networks that parents have. There are many opportunities for children out there, private schools, boarding schools, and then many individuals will say, well, you can just, get into a lottery system, or there's lots of financial aid packages. So you start to get this system in place where even if there are small, slim opportunities to change schools or to change districts, you need to have the social resources, or that, it's called the social capital in place, and the time to be, and usually it comes with some kind of expense to make that happen. So one of I think the pernicious aspects of systemic racism, especially in the United States, is that kind of the myth of meritocracy. Like, if you so chose, you could be in a different situation. It's just a click of the button, and now on the web, everything's available. And I think the most pernicious part of systemic racism is that you can't see all the constraints that an individual or a family or a neighborhood is contending with. And so it feels like it's equal, but that's because you don't see all of the challenges that Dr. Stewart is illuminating. And there are even more.